The Malon thought they could push humans around, but we were about to give their scaly green asses a fucking wake-up call. One they'd never forget. I settled onto the old metal stool, flakes of rust sticking into my pants. A dozen younger human faces stared up at me, eagerly waiting to hear the tale. The tale of how humanity finally put its foot down and showed the galaxy who was boss. Listen close. It was 20 years ago. Humans were still the new kids on the galactic scene, fighting for a seat at the big boy table. The Malon, those conniving lizard bastards, had us by the balls, controlled all the unobtainium shipping lanes from here to Alpha Centauri. Without access to their tech and star routes, humanity was doomed, just another footnote in galactic history. The Council sent this hotshot kid diplomat to bargain with those cold-blooded snakes. Get us the resources we needed to survive, build our defenses, our fleets. His name was Philip Walker, smart as a whip, but green as grass. He strutted into that Malon space station, head full of big ideas, ready to broker the deal of the century. Little did he know the Malon rep Uko was ready for him. A sly old croc, 10 feet tall, scales that could deflect pulse blasts, eyes like twin suns that bored right through your skull. He'd eaten 100 human negotiators for breakfast, and used their bones to pick his teeth. But Philip had no clue who he was dealing with. See, out there among the stars, it's an alien-eat-human world. You come to the table weak, unprepared, they'll crush you like a bug, chew you up and spit you out. Earth was counting on Philip, all of humanity's hopes, dreams, futures, riding on his shoulders. Too bad for us he was just a babe in the woods, and Uko was a wolf licking its chops. The kids leaned forward, eyes wide, spines tingling. I took a swig of whiskey, let the burn settle in my chest. Those were the bad old days, when mankind teetered on the brink, one wrong step from being just another alien's bitch. Strap in, kids, because this is the story of how Philip Walker stared into the devil's eyes, and finally made those Malon bastards blink. The day humanity started fighting back, and let the galaxy know the humans were coming, and heaven help anyone who stood in our way. The air crackled with tension as Philip and Uko sized each other up in that cold, sterile meeting room. They sat at opposite ends of a sleek metal slab that passed for a table. Philip had his game face on, but deep down he knew he was locked in the snake pit with the biggest serpent of them all. Now Philip was no fool. He knew he was walking into a viper's nest, but he also knew that humanity needed this deal, I explained to the wide-eyed kids. Philip slid a sleek tablet across the table. It contained the human proposal, our most advanced medical tech and know-how, in exchange for unfettered access to the Malon's rich mineral deposits on a dozen systems, the kind of resources that could fuel humanity's expansion and shore up our defenses for generations. Uko studied the tablet with his inscrutable reptilian gaze. His scales gleamed under the harsh white lights. Philip launched into his spiel, hammering home the benefits of the deal. How it would enrich both our peoples. A rising tide to lift all boats. But I could see right through Uko's poker face, the subtle twitch of his jaw muscles, the way his claws drummed against the tabletop as Philip spoke. Uko was a master of manipulation, and he knew exactly how to push Philip's buttons, I warned the kids. And push them he did. Just as Philip finished his pitch, Uko hit him with a sucker punch. The Malon would grant us access to their minerals, but only if humanity shared its most cutting-edge weapons tech. Uko spun some bullshit about equivalent exchange, the value of Malon resources. But we all knew the score. The lizards wanted our guns, our bombs, the secrets of our arsenal. Philip didn't even blink. Our weapons are not on the table, he said, his voice pure steel. This is a negotiation, not a shakedown. I could practically hear Uko's scales scraping as he leaned forward, his eyes narrowing to slits. The Malon rep was done playing nice. The temperature dropped 10 degrees as he pinned Philip with a predator's glare. This was the moment of truth, folks. Philip had to stand his ground or the Malon would walk all over us, I said, my voice low. The kids were holding their breath. And then Uko was on his feet, storming towards the door in a blaze of green scales and seething anger. The meeting was over. He'd laid down his ultimatum, and Philip had called his bluff. The human sat there, alone in the cavernous room, staring at the space where Ukko had been, the weight of worlds pressing down on his shoulders. I paused my tale, taking another swig of whiskey as the kids hung on my every word. They were hooked now, desperate to know what happened next. I savoured the burn in my throat before continuing. A few days later, Philip was back on Earth, standing before the big wigs at the United Nations Interstellar Relations Council. He knew he had to convince them to grow a backbone and stand up to the Malon. Time was running out. The Malon weren't exactly known for their patience. If humanity didn't act fast, they might just take their business elsewhere, leaving us high and dry. Philip strode into the council chamber, his jaw set with determination. He laid out his plan, his voice ringing with conviction. We can't let the Malon push us around any longer. It's time to show them that humanity means business. We need to forge new alliances with other races, species that share our values, and we need to double down on our military tech, build up our strength so the Malon think twice before crossing us again. The council members shifted in their seats, murmuring amongst themselves. Some nodded along with Philip's words, their eyes alight with the promise of a bolder future. But others looked skeptical, even afraid. They were used to playing it safe, not rocking the boat. Philip could see the doubt in their eyes, but he wasn't about to back down. He leaned forward, his gaze unflinching. If we don't take a stand now, we'll be nothing more than footnotes in galactic history. The Malon will walk all over us, and every other species will see us as easy prey. Is that what you want for humanity? To be the galaxy's doormat? The room fell silent as Philip's words sank in. The weight of the moment was palpable. This was a turning point, a chance for humanity to seize its destiny among the stars. As the meeting wrapped up, Philip's comm device pinged with an incoming message. His eyes widened as he read it, his face draining of color. It was from an anonymous source within the Malon government, someone with a guilty conscience and a warning to share. The message laid bare the Malon's true intentions. The trade deal, the negotiations, it was all a smokescreen. The lizards didn't want to be our partners. They wanted to infiltrate our world, sabotage us from the inside out, turn humanity into a puppet state, dancing on Malon strings. Philip's hands shook with rage as the truth sank in. The Malon's deception knew no bounds. They'd played him for a fool, strung him along with false promises and crocodile smiles. In that moment, Philip knew what he had to do. He had to expose the Malon's treachery, rally humanity's allies, and make a stand. It was a massive gamble, one that could either save our species or doom us to eternal servitude. But it was a gamble he was ready to take. For the future of humanity, he'd risk it all. I leaned back on my stool, the metal creaking beneath me. The kids were rapt, their eyes wide and pulses pounding. They could feel the weight of the moment, the fork in the road where humanity's fate would be decided. What Philip did next would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. It would be the stuff of legends, the tale of how one man's courage and cunning changed the course of history. The Malon thought they had us right where they wanted us, but they were about to learn that you should never ever underestimate the humans. Philip slid into the shadowy booth, his eyes darting around the dingy bar. The air was thick with smoke and secrets. His heart raced as he waited, one hand resting on the data drive in his pocket. It contained the message that would blow this conspiracy wide open. The door creaked and 3 figures slipped inside. Philip nodded to his most trusted allies, Zoe, his right hand at the Interstellar Relations Council, Marcus, a hotshot hacker with a nose for buried data, and Lena, an ex-Malon operative who'd seen the light. They were the only ones Philip could count on in this nest of vipers. You all know why we're here, Philip murmured as they huddled around the table, voices low. The Malon aren't just playing hardball, they're out to destroy us, infiltrate our world, tear us apart from within. He tapped the data drive. I've got proof we can take to the Galactic Summit. Expose their plot, rally the other races to our side, but I can't do this alone. I need your help to— Whoa, hold on, Marcus interrupted, his brow furrowed. You want us to go toe-to-toe with the Malon based on an anonymous tip and a hunch? Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? Zoe nodded slowly. He's right, Philip. We all know the Malon play dirty, but this is next level. If they catch wind of what we're doing, there'll be hell to pay. Philip leaned forward, his eyes blazing in the dim light. Don't you see, this is our only shot, our one chance to stop the Malon, before it's too late, before they turn humanity into their puppet, their plaything. He turned to Lena, searching her face. You've seen their tricks firsthand. Tell them. Tell them what the Malon are really capable of. Lena met his gaze, her jaw tight. It's worse than you can imagine. The things I saw, the plots they hatched. If even half of what Philip says is true, we can't afford to sit this out. The table fell silent, the weight of the moment settling on their shoulders. Marcus drummed his fingers on the data drive, chewing his lip. Zoe stared into her untouched drink, her face unreadable. I know it's a risk, Philip said quietly. The biggest gamble of our lives, but if we don't act now, we may not get another chance. So I'm asking you, not as your colleague, not as your friend, but as someone who believes in humanity's future. Will you stand with me? One by one they nodded. Zoe straightened her spine, a steely glint in her eye. Marcus cracked his knuckles, a slow grin spreading across his face. Lena's hand tightened on her mug, her gaze locked on Philip's. All right then, Philip said, a spark of hope kindling in his chest. Let's get to work, we've got a galaxy to save. The next weeks passed in a blur of midnight meetings and covert data raids. Philip and his team worked around the clock, fueled by coffee and sheer determination. They combed through terabytes of encrypted Malon communications, chasing leads and connecting dots. Slowly but surely a picture began to emerge. Shadowy Malon agents, worming their way into key government posts. Shell companies funneling funds to human traitors, buying their loyalty and silence. Experimental weapons, reverse-engineered from stolen human tech. The evidence was damning, each new revelation hitting Philip like a punch to the gut. How could he have been so blind? The Malon had been playing them all for fools, laying the groundwork for humanity's downfall brick by brick. But even as they stacked data points and built their case, the spectre of discovery loomed over them. Malon spies seemed to lurk in every corner, their forked tongues tasting the air for any sign of treachery. Philip barely slept, his dreams haunted by visions of humanity in chains. He watched his back at every turn, jumping at every shadow. One wrong move, one careless slip, and it could all come crashing down. But he couldn't turn back now, not when they were so close to the truth, to the evidence that would shatter the Malon schemes and rally the galaxy to Earth's side. One morning, a message pinged on Philip's encrypted comm. It was from Zoe. Just 2 words, "It's time." Philip's heart raced as he scanned the attached files. Shipping manifests, surveillance logs, bank records, the final pieces of the puzzle slotting into place with damning clarity. He felt a sudden swell of emotion, pride, fear, determination. This was it, the moment of truth, the dossier that would change everything. With shaking hands, Philip copied the files to a secure data stick. He slipped it into his pocket, the weight of the future pressing against his chest. It was time to blow this thing wide open, to stand before the galaxy and speak truth to power, to make the Malon answer for their crimes and secure humanity's place among the stars. The Galactic Summit awaited, and Philip would be there to meet it, head high, eyes blazing, and the truth on his side. The Malon had no idea what was coming, but they were about to find out, the hard way, what happens when you try to mess with the humans. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council stretched out before us, a cavernous expanse of gleaming metal and pulsing lights. Representatives from 1,000 worlds packed the tiered seats, a dizzying array of scales, fur, and tentacles. The air crackled with 100 alien tongues, a din of clicks and hisses and throaty warbles. I'd seen a lot of far-out shit in my day, but this was next level, I said, my voice low. The kids leaned forward, hanging on every word. At the center of it all stood Philip and his team, a small knot of humans in a sea of extraterrestrial strangeness. They strode to the towering podium, backs straight, eyes fixed straight ahead. The weight of humanity's future rested on their shoulders, but they carried it with a grim resolve. Philip stepped to the microphone, his face cast in stark relief by the searing spotlight. The chatter died away as 1,000 alien eyes fixed on the lone human. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," Philip began, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "I come before you today with grave news, news that strikes at the very heart of the galactic community." He paused, letting his words sink in. The silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of the environmental systems. "The Malon, one of the most powerful and influential species in the galaxy, have been deceiving us all. They have used the promise of trade and cooperation as a smokescreen for their true intentions, to infiltrate, undermine, and ultimately subjugate humanity." A ripple of unease swept through the assembly, a susurrus of gasps and muttered oaths. I saw shock, disbelief, even outrage on the faces of the gathered dignitaries. Philip pressed on, his voice rising with conviction. He laid out the evidence piece by damning piece, communiques between Malon agents, financial records of bribes and blackmail, footage of clandestine meetings and covert operations. With each revelation, the mood in the chamber shifted, the unease giving way to a simmering anger. You could feel it, the raw fucking fury radiating off those alien bastards, I growled. The Malon had played them all for fools, and they were pissed. As Philip hammered home his final point, a roar of outrage erupted from the assembly. Fists pounded on armrests, voices raised in a cacophony of condemnation. The tide had turned, the once unassailable Malon now teetering on the brink. But they weren't going down without a fight. Uko, that scaly son of a bitch, surged to his feet, his eyes blazing with malevolent fury. He jabbed a clawed finger at Philip, spittle flying from his serrated jaws. "Lies!" Uko roared, his voice booming across the assembly. "The humans have fabricated this so-called evidence. They seek to sow discord and chaos, to turn the galactic community against its most loyal member." Philip stood firm, meeting Uko's accusatory glare with unflinching resolve. The two squared off, a battle of wills unfolding on the galactic stage. "We have incontrovertible proof of the Malon's treachery," Philip shot back, his jaw set. "They have violated the most sacred principles of the galactic community. They must be held accountable for their crimes." But Uko was relentless, hammering at the council with a barrage of twisted half-truths and bold-faced lies. I could see some of the weaker-willed representatives starting to waver, doubt creeping into their eyes. For a sickening moment, it looked like the Malon might just slither their way out of this mess. That's when the Zorgons made their move. A hush fell over the assembly as Zorax, the towering Zorgon ambassador, strode to the podium. His quicksilver skin shimmered under the lights, his eyes glinting with ancient wisdom. "The Zorgon Imperium has long watched the Malon with growing concern," Zorax intoned, his voice a rumbling bass that shook the air. "We, too, have uncovered evidence of their duplicity, their insidious schemes to sow chaos and discord among the stars." He turned to face Uko, fixing the Malon leader with a piercing stare. "The humans speak the truth. The Malon have violated the trust of the galactic community, and they must answer for their crimes." A chorus of assent rose from the assembly, the Zorgon's words galvanizing the gathered races. The mood shifted in an instant, the council united in its condemnation of Malon treachery. "It was a fucking masterstroke," I said, shaking my head in amazement. "With the Zorgons in our corner, the Malon didn't stand a snowball's chance in hell." The chamber erupted into a frenzy of activity, a dozen races clamoring for the floor. The calls for sanctions, for embargoes, for outright war against the Malon grew louder with each passing moment. Through it all, Philip and Uko remained locked in their silent battle, eyes blazing, jaws clenched. The fate of their species hung in the balance, the future of the galaxy teetering on a razor's edge. I leaned back on my stool, the rusted metal groaning under my weight. The kids were rapt, their eyes wide, their hearts pounding. They knew they were witness to history in the making, to the moment when humanity finally stood tall among the stars. But the fight was far from over, kids. The Malon were backed into a corner, and there's nothing more dangerous than a cornered snake. Uko had one last card to play, one final gambit that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. And Philip, Well, let's just say the poor bastard had no idea what he was in for. The streets of New York erupted with celebration as the news from the Galactic Council broke. Crowds poured into Times Square, waving flags and banners, chanting "Humanity" until their voices grew hoarse. In London, Paris, Tokyo, people danced and embraced, tears of joy streaming down their faces. For once, the petty squabbles and divisions that had long plagued our species seemed to melt away, replaced by a sense of unity and purpose. "We did it," a young woman in Berlin cried, her face painted with the colors of Earth. "We showed those Mallan bastards that we won't be pushed around anymore." But even as humanity reveled in its triumph, the leaders who had fought so hard for this moment knew that the battle was far from over. In the halls of power, urgent messages flashed across secure channels, bearing news that chilled the blood. "Mallan ships have been detected at the edge of our space," a grim-faced admiral reported to the Emergency Council. "They're massing in numbers we've never seen before. It looks like they're preparing for an invasion." Philip felt a cold knot of fear in his gut as he studied the holographic displays. The Mallan fleet was vast, a swarm of cruel-looking ships bristling with weapons. If they struck now, while Earth was still celebrating, it would be a slaughter. He slammed his fist on the table, his face hard with resolve. "We need to mobilize now, every ship, every soldier, every weapon we've got. We can't let the Mallan catch us with our pants down." In the days that followed, Earth became a hive of activity. Factories churned out tanks and fighters around the clock, while engineers worked feverishly to bolster the planet's defenses. In the shipyards, mighty warships took shape, their hulls gleaming with freshly minted armor. Philip worked himself to the bone, coordinating with military leaders and alien allies to develop a plan of action. They would not sit back and wait for the Mallan to come to them. They would take the fight to the enemy on their own terms. "It was a thing of beauty, folks," the narrator recounted, his voice thick with pride. "Seeing our boys and girls in uniform, standing tall and ready to defend our home. Humans of every color and creed, united as one." But even as Earth girded itself for war, Philip couldn't shake the feeling that there had to be another way. He had seen too much death and destruction in his life to believe that violence was the only answer. When the message from Uko came, requesting a private meeting on neutral ground, Philip knew he had to take the chance. His advisors warned him against it, insisting that it was a trap, that he was walking into the serpent's den. But Philip was willing to risk everything for the chance to end this conflict before it began. "If there's even a chance for peace, I have to take it," he told them, his voice firm with conviction. "I won't let pride or fear stand in the way of doing what's right for our people." And so, with a heavy heart and a flicker of hope, Philip prepared to face his nemesis once more. The future of humanity hung in the balance, and he would do whatever it took to secure it. The shuttle touched down on the barren, windswept surface of the neutral moon, kicking up clouds of red dust. Philip emerged into the harsh light, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of treachery. His hand rested on the butt of his pulse pistol, ready to draw at a moment's notice. Uko stood waiting, flanked by a pair of hulking bodyguards. The Mallan leader's scales gleamed in the bloody light, his eyes glittering with a predatory intensity. He spread his clawed hands in a gesture of mock welcome. "Philip," he hissed, his forked tongue darting out to taste the air. "I'm so glad you could join me. We have much to discuss, you and I." Philip approached warily, every muscle tensed for action. He knew he was walking into the lion's den, but he refused to show fear in the face of his enemy. "What's your game, Uko?" he demanded, his voice cold as steel. "You've got a lot of nerve calling me here after everything you've done. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't blast you right here and now." Uko chuckled, a rasping sound like stones grinding together. "Come now, Philip, is that any way to greet an old friend? And here I thought we could come to an understanding, like civilized beings." Philip's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Civilized? You wouldn't know the meaning of the word if it bit you on the arse. You've lied, cheated, and murdered your way across the galaxy, and now you expect me to play nice." Uko's expression hardened, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. "Watch your tone, human. You forget who you're dealing with. The Malon Empire has endured for 1,000 generations, while your kind were still crawling in the mud. We will not be lectured by upstarts and primitives." Philip fought down the surge of rage that boiled up inside him. He knew that Uko was goading him, trying to provoke a reaction. He couldn't afford to lose his cool, not now. "Enough games," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You called me here for a reason. Start talking before I lose my patience." Uko stared at him for a long moment, his gaze inscrutable. Then slowly, he reached into the folds of his robe and withdrew a small, glittering object. Philip tensed, ready for an attack, but Uko simply held the thing up to the light. It was a data crystal, its facets catching the harsh glare of the moon's sun. Philip frowned, confusion warring with suspicion in his mind. "What is that?" he asked, his voice wary. Uko smiled, a cold reptilian expression that sent shivers down Philip's spine. "This, my dear Philip, is the key to your future, and the future of your pathetic little species." He tossed the crystal to Philip, who caught it reflexively. It was warm to the touch, pulsing with some inner energy that made his skin crawl. "I'll let you puzzle out its secrets for yourself," Uko said, his voice dripping with false magnanimity. "But know this, the path you choose now will determine the fate of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. Choose wisely, Philip Walker. The eyes of history are upon you." With that, the Malon leader turned and strode back towards his ship, his bodyguards falling into step behind him. Philip watched them go, the data crystal clutched tight in his fist. 1,000 questions raced through his mind as he stared down at the glittering object. What secrets did it hold? What game was Uko playing? And most importantly, what price would humanity have to pay for the knowledge it contained? The narrator exhaled, the weight of the moment heavy in the air. "There are a lot of ways a man can lose his soul," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Greed, hate, despair. But the worst, the absolute worst, is to lose it to fear. And that, kids, is exactly the trap that Uko had laid for Philip. A trap baited with the promise of salvation, but with a hook that would tear out his very heart." The wind whipped across the barren plain, kicking up swirls of red dust that danced around Philip's boots. He stood in the shadow of his shuttle, squinting against the harsh glare of the moon's twin suns. Uko loomed before him, a towering figure in black robes that billowed in the hot breeze. "I must admit I'm surprised you came," Uko said, his voice a rasping hiss. "I thought you'd be too busy marshalling your forces, preparing for the war you know is coming." Philip met the Mullen's gaze, his jaw tight. "I'm here because I believe in the possibility of peace, even if it means dealing with the likes of you." Uko chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Peace? A pretty word, but a fleeting thing. The galaxy is a harsh mistress, Philip. She favors the strong, the ruthless, and the Malon have been playing this game far longer than your kind." "Get to the point, Uko," Philip snapped. "I didn't come here to listen to your posturing." The Malon leader paused, his eyes glinting in the harsh light. "Very well, I have a proposal for you, Philip. A compromise, if you will." Philip's eyebrows shot up. "I'm listening." Uko stepped forward, his clawed feet crunching on the rocky ground. "The Malon will withdraw our ships from your borders. We will cease our efforts to infiltrate your society, to manipulate your politics and economy. In short, we will leave you in peace." Philip felt a flicker of hope in his chest, but he quickly tamped it down. He knew better than to trust the Malon's promises. "And what do you want in return?" he asked, his voice wary. Uko smiled, a thin reptilian expression. "Merely your assurance that humanity will not share its advanced weapons technology with any other species. Your guns, your bombs, your ships, they stay in human hands, and human hands alone." Philip's mind raced as he considered the offer. On the surface, it seemed like a fair deal. The Malon would back off, and humanity would retain its military edge. But he knew there had to be a catch. "Why now?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. Why offer this deal after all the years of hostility and manipulation? Ukko hesitated, and for a moment Philip saw a flicker of something in the Malon's eyes, something that looked almost like desperation. "The Malon are not as strong as we appear," Ukko said, his voice low. "Our homeworld is facing a crisis, an energy shortage that threatens our very survival. We need your technology, Philip. Your weapons, yes, but also your power sources, your advanced reactors." Philip stared at the Malon leader, his mind reeling. All this time he had thought of the Malon as an implacable foe, a powerful empire bent on dominating the galaxy. But now he saw them in a new light, a desperate, struggling species, just like humanity. "So that's it," he said, his voice soft. "You need us just as much as we need you." Ukko's jaw tightened, and Philip saw a flash of anger in the Malon's eyes, but it quickly faded, replaced by a look of grudging respect. "Perhaps," Ukko said, his voice gruff, "but do not mistake our desperation for weakness. The Malon are still a force to be reckoned with, and we will not hesitate to crush you if you stand in our way." Philip nodded, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't trust the Malon, not after everything they had done, but he also knew that refusing the offer could mean all-out war, a conflict that would tear the galaxy apart. And then, in a flash of inspiration, he saw a way forward, a path that could lead to a lasting peace, not just a temporary truce. "I have a counter-offer," he said, his voice steady. "Humanity will provide the technology you need to solve your energy crisis. Our reactors, our power grids, we'll share them with you, openly and freely." Ukko's eyes widened, and Philip saw a flicker of surprise on the Malon's face. "And in return?" "In return, you agree to a formal alliance with humanity, a true partnership built on mutual trust and cooperation. We work together to build a better future for both our species and for the galaxy as a whole." There was a long, tense moment as Ukko considered the offer. Philip could see the wheels turning behind the Malon's eyes, the calculations and considerations whirling in his mind. "It's a bold proposal," Ukko said at last, his voice thoughtful. "But how can I trust that you will keep your word, that you won't use this alliance to undermine the Malon, to weaken us from within?" Philip met Ukko's gaze, his eyes hard. "You have my word, Ukko, and more than that, you have my commitment to a better future, one where our species work together, not against each other." The Malon leader was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching Philip's face, and then slowly he nodded. "Very well," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "I accept your offer, Philip Walker. May the stars bear witness to this moment, and may our alliance be a long and prosperous one." As the two leaders shook hands, the weight of the moment settling on their shoulders, Philip felt a flicker of hope in his chest. It was a fragile thing, a tiny spark in the darkness of the galaxy. But it was there, and it was real. The narrator leaned back, his eyes distant as he remembered that fateful meeting on the red plains of the neutral moon. It was a turning point, folks, a moment that would shape the destiny of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. Philip had taken a chance, a gamble on the possibility of peace, and now the future was in their hands. He took a long, slow sip of his whiskey, savoring the burn in his throat. The kids leaned forward, their eyes wide and eager. "What happened next?" one of them asked, her voice breathless with excitement. The narrator smiled, a slow, knowing grin. "Now that's a tale for another time, my young friends. But let's just say this. The alliance between humanity and the Malon, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were challenges, obstacles, moments when it seemed like the whole thing would come crashing down around our ears." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the dim light of the bar. But Philip, he never gave up. He fought for that alliance, tooth and nail. He knew that it was the key to humanity's future, to our place among the stars. And in the end, well... The narrator trailed off, his gaze distant once more. The kids waited, their breaths held in anticipation. But Ukko, that silver-tongued snake, he wasn't about to let bygones be bygones, the narrator continued, his voice low and gruff. No, He had one last trick up his sleeve, one final play to make. In a remote human research facility, Philip and his team of scientists worked feverishly to prepare the energy technology that would save the Malon homeworld. The lab was a hive of activity, a symphony of whirring machines and clacking keyboards. Philip moved from station to station, his brow furrowed with concentration. He peered over the shoulders of his researchers, nodding approvingly at their progress. "Keep at it, people," he barked, his voice cutting through the din. "We don't have a moment to lose." Just then, an urgent message flashed across the main screen. Philip's eyes widened as he read the text, his heart pounding in his chest. "The Council has reached a decision," he breathed, his voice a mix of hope and trepidation. "They're ready to render judgment on the Malon." The scene shifted to the Grand Assembly Hall, where Philip and Uko stood side by side before the gathered dignitaries. The air crackled with tension as the Council's spokesperson, a spindly creature with luminous eyes, stepped forward to deliver the verdict. "In light of the overwhelming evidence presented by humanity and the Zorgon Empire, this Council finds the Malon guilty of attempted subversion and undermining of galactic peace," the spokesperson intoned, their voice ringing through the chamber. "As such, we order the Malon to make full restitution to those they have wronged, and to submit to ongoing oversight to ensure their compliance with galactic law." The assembly erupted in a cacophony of murmurs and gasps. Philip let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his shoulders sagging with relief. He turned to Uko, expecting to see defeat etched on the Malon's scaly features. But Uko's expression was inscrutable, his eyes glinting with a strange light. "Well played, human," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "But don't think for a moment that this is over." Before Philip could respond, a klaxon blared through the assembly hall, red lights flashing in warning. The council members looked around in confusion and fear, unsure of what was happening. "We've received an emergency transmission from the Zendari colony," a uniformed aide announced, his voice trembling. "They're under attack by an unknown alien force, and they're requesting immediate assistance." Philip's blood ran cold as he processed the news. He turned to Uko, his eyes narrowing. "What do you know about this?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Uko spread his clawed hands in a gesture of innocence, but Philip could see the calculating glint in his eyes. "I know nothing of this attack, human, but it seems our alliance will be put to the test sooner than we thought." As the assembly descended into chaos, Philip clenched his fists, his mind racing. He knew that this new threat, whatever it was, would require all of humanity's strength and ingenuity to overcome. And with the Malon by their side, for better or worse, they would have to face it together. The narrator took a long pull from his glass, the amber liquid glinting in the dim light. "And so, folks, the stage was set for the final act of our little drama. Humanity and the Malon, two species that had been at each other's throats for generations, now standing shoulder to shoulder against a common foe." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "But let me tell you, kids, the road ahead was anything but smooth. The challenges that Philip and his allies would face, well, let's just say that the fate of the galaxy itself hung in the balance." The kids leaned in, their eyes wide with anticipation, as the narrator took another swig of his drink. The story was far from over, and the stakes had never been higher. The klaxons blared aboard Philip's flagship, the Indomitable, as the human and Malon fleets clashed with the unknown alien force. Philip gripped the arms of his command chair, his knuckles white as he watched the chaos unfold on the view screen. Sleek, silver ships darted and weaved, trading blasts of searing energy with the bulbous, organic-looking vessels of the enemy. "Status report!" Philip barked, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Shields at 60%, his tactical officer replied, her voice tight with tension. "We're taking heavy fire but holding steady." Philip nodded, his jaw clenched. The Malon ships fought alongside them, their angular black vessels slicing through the void like predators. It was a sight he never thought he'd see, humanity and the Malon united against a common foe. But even as they fought together, Philip knew they were up against an enemy unlike any they had faced before. The alien ships seemed to shrug off their attacks, their shields absorbing the brunt of the damage. They needed a breakthrough, and fast. In the bowels of the Indomitable, Philip's team of scientists and engineers worked feverishly to analyze the alien technology. They pored over sensor readings and battle data, searching for any weakness they could exploit. Dr. Elena Satov, Philip's lead scientist, rubbed her bloodshot eyes as she stared at the holographic display. She had been awake for over 36 hours, fueled by a cocktail of stims and sheer determination. "For there has to be something we're missing," she muttered, her fingers flying over the console. "Some flaw in their defenses, some chink in their armor." Suddenly her eyes widened. "Wait a second," she breathed, zooming in on a specific section of the alien ship's shield matrix. "I think I've got something." She tapped her comm badge, her voice urgent. "Captain Walker, I need you in the lab immediately. We may have found a way to turn the tide of this battle." Philip was out of his chair in an instant, racing through the corridors of the Indomitable. When he burst into the lab, Elena was already pulling up a schematic of the alien ship's shields. "Look here," she said, pointing to a glowing node on the display. "There's a fluctuation in their shield harmonics, a weakness that appears every time they fire their main weapon. If we can time our attacks to coincide with that fluctuation, we may be able to punch through their defenses." Philip felt a surge of hope, a glimmer of light in the darkness. "How long until we can implement this?" he asked, his voice tight with urgency. "Give me 10 minutes, Elena replied, her fingers already flying over the console. "I'll send the targeting data to the fleet. If we coordinate our fire, we should be able to take these bastards down." Philip nodded, his face grim. "Do it," he said, turning to head back to the bridge. "And Elena, good work. This could be the break we've been looking for." As he strode through the corridors, Philip felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time since the battle began, he allowed himself to believe that they might just make it out of this alive. But when he stepped onto the bridge, his blood ran cold. On the view screen, a massive alien ship loomed, dwarfing the human and Malon vessels like a leviathan from the depths of space. "Incoming transmission," his comm officer reported, her voice shaking. It's from the alien ship, sir." Philip steeled himself, his heart pounding in his chest. "On screen," he ordered, his voice steady. The image that appeared was unlike anything he had ever seen. A creature with mottled green skin and bulbous black eyes stared back at him, its expression unreadable. "People of Earth and Malon," the creature spoke, its voice a guttural rasp. "We come to you not as conquerors but as refugees. Our home has been destroyed, our people scattered to the winds. We seek only survival, a chance to rebuild what we have lost." Philip felt a chill run down his spine, a sense of confusion and dread washing over him. "If you are not our enemy, then why did you attack us?" he demanded, his voice harsh. The alien's eyes seemed to soften, a flicker of sorrow passing over its features. "We acted out of fear," it replied, its voice heavy with regret. "We have been hunted across the stars, pursued by an enemy that will stop at nothing to see us destroyed. When your ships approached, we assumed the worst. We beg your forgiveness and your aid in facing this threat." Philip's mind raced, trying to process this new information. If what the alien said was true, then they were all in grave danger. An enemy powerful enough to destroy an entire civilization, one that even now might be bearing down on them. He looked around the bridge, saw the faces of his crew staring back at him, human and Malon alike, united in their confusion and their fear. "This changes everything," he said softly, his voice heavy with the weight of the moment. "If we're going to survive this, we need to stand together, all of us." The narrator leaned back, his eyes distant as he recalled that fateful moment. It was a turning point, folks, a realization that the galaxy was a whole lot bigger and a whole lot scarier than any of us had ever imagined, and that if we wanted to make it through to the other side, we needed to put aside our differences and fight as one. He took a long swig of his whiskey, savoring the burn. But that was just the beginning, because the real threat, the one that had driven those aliens to our doorstep, well, that was something else entirely, something that would test the very limits of our courage and our resolve. And Philip, poor bastard, had no idea what he was about to get himself into. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Philip faced a roomful of grim human and Malon leaders, their faces etched with the strain of the past hour's battle. The refugee leaders' words hung heavy in the air, a plea for aid that tugged at heartstrings, even as it raised hackles. Admiral Vance, an old warhorse with more battle scars than most, slammed a fist on the table. "Damn it, Philip, we can't trust these creatures. For all we know, this is some kind of trick, a trap to lower our guard." Philip met Vance's glare, his own eyes hard as flint. "And what if it's not, Admiral? What if they're telling the truth? Can we really turn our backs on a people in need, just because we're afraid?" He turned to face the others, his voice ringing with conviction. "I know we've all suffered at the hands of hostile aliens. The Malon, the Zorgons, even these refugees. We've shed blood and lost loved ones to their kind. But that's exactly why we have to be better, to rise above the old hatreds and suspicions." Philip's gaze swept the room, locking eyes with each leader in turn. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore. We're fighting for the soul of our species, for the principles that make us human. And one of those principles is compassion, the willingness to help those in need, even at great cost to ourselves." The Malon ambassador, a battle-scarred warrior named Tarok, stirred in his seat. "The human speaks wisdom," he rumbled, his voice like gravel. "The Malon, too, have known the sting of betrayal, the pain of being alone in a hostile universe. If we turn away from these refugees, we betray the very ideals we claim to uphold." Slowly, grudgingly, the other leaders nodded their assent. Philip felt a surge of relief, tempered by the knowledge of the hard road ahead. "Then it's decided," he said, his voice firm. "We offer the refugees sanctuary, and we stand with them against whatever threats may come. We fight not as separate species, but as a united galaxy." The meeting adjourned, and Philip found himself on the observation deck, staring out at the sea of stars. The refugee ships hung alongside the human and Malon vessels, battered but unbowed. It was a start. A fragile flame of hope kindled in the darkness. "Zio did good in there," a voice said from behind him. Philip turned to see Eleanor, her face lined with fatigue but her eyes bright with pride. "I just hope it's enough," Philip murmured, turning back to the stars. "There's still so much we don't know, so many dangers lurking in the shadows." Eleanor stepped up beside him, her shoulder brushing his. "We'll face them together like we always have. Humans, Malons, refugees, we're in this fight as one." As he stood there, watching the stars wheel overhead, Philip felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The road ahead would be hard, the battles fierce, and the losses painful. But for the first time, he truly believed they had a chance to build a better future, a galaxy where all species could stand as equals, a chance to make the sacrifices and the struggles mean something more than just endless war. The narrator's voice cut through Philip's musings, low and heavy with the weight of history. "It was a turning point, folks, a moment when the old ways died and something new was born. The humans had set out to save themselves, but in the end, they did something far greater. They lit a spark of hope, a beacon that would guide the galaxy through its darkest hour." The scene shifted, the observation deck fading away to be replaced by the inky void of space. A massive ship hung against the stars, its hull a patchwork of a dozen alien technologies. "But the true test was yet to come," the narrator intoned. "For out there in the darkness an enemy was stirring, an enemy that would push the fragile alliance to its breaking point and beyond." The ship lit its engines, a flare of blue-white light that cast stark shadows across the galaxy. As it lumbered into motion, the narrator's voice echoed through the void. The humans and their allies had made their stand. Now they would face the consequences, for in the cold depths of space there are no second chances. Only the strong survive, and the weak perish. The ship vanished into the darkness, leaving only the fading echoes of the narrator's voice and the looming spectre of the trials yet to come. Philip stood on the bridge, watching the refugee ships fall into formation alongside the human and Malon vessels. It was a ragtag fleet, cobbled together from the survivors of a dozen worlds. But it was a start. The comms crackled to life, the voice of the refugee leader filling the air. "On behalf of my people, I thank you," the alien said, his voice thick with emotion. "We will not forget this kindness, this chance at a new beginning." Philip nodded, his throat tight. "We're in this together now," he said. "Whatever comes, we'll face it as one." As the fleet powered up its engines, Philip felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Tarok, the Malon ambassador, his face grim. "You realize this is just the beginning, don't you?" the Malon said, his voice low. "The true enemy is still out there waiting, and when they come—" Philip met Tarok's gaze, his own eyes hard as steel. "We'll be ready," he said. "We have to be." The fleet leapt forward, hurtling into the unknown, and as the stars streaked past the viewports, Philip couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into the jaws of something vast and terrible, a darkness that would test them all to their very limits. But they would face it together, humans and Malons and refugees alike, for in the end that was all they had, each other and the slim hope of a better tomorrow. The narrator's voice faded away, leaving only the hum of the engines and the soft breathing of the crew. The future stretched out before them, a yawning void filled with danger and uncertainty. But for now they had each other, and that would have to be enough. If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video, then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.